Welcome back to Global Facts, bringing you the latest news from around the world. Tonight, the world holds its breath as the United Nations reimposes sweeping sanctions on Iran, unraveling a decade of diplomacy. Against the backdrop of the 80th UN General Assembly, this snapback was triggered by Iran's refusal to cooperate with nuclear inspectors and engage with the U.S. These are not just financial penalties, they freeze Iranian assets, halt arms deals, and target Iran's missile program. For the Trump administration and its European allies, this is a necessary step to curb Iran's destabilizing activities. Iran calls it economic warfare, with its foreign minister condemning the move and declaring diplomacy dead. The decision comes amid global turmoil, ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, and rising military tensions worldwide. This new flashpoint with Iran adds complexity and danger to an already volatile landscape. Will this pressure force Iran back to talks or push it toward more aggressive actions? With diplomatic channels freezing and military tensions rising, the path forward is shrouded in uncertainty. This is a story about power, politics, and the profound human consequences of decisions made in rooms like these. To understand today's crisis, we must revisit the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, brokered in 2015 between Iran and 6 world powers. Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program and allow inspections, in exchange for relief from crippling sanctions. For a time the deal worked, Iran complied and its economy reopened to the world. But critics, including Donald Trump, argued it was too lenient and ignored Iran's missile program and regional activities. In 2018, President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the deal, reimposing and expanding sanctions in a maximum pressure campaign. European allies tried to keep the deal alive, but U.S. secondary sanctions made it nearly impossible for Iran to benefit. In response, Iran scaled back its commitments, enriching more uranium and restricting inspectors. This cycle of escalation eroded trust on all sides. The U.S. pointed to Iran's actions as proof it couldn't be trusted. Iran argued the U.S. had already abandoned the agreement. The slow collapse of the JCPOA set the stage for today's snapback. The very mechanism meant to enforce the deal has now triggered its undoing. The snapback mechanism, built into the 2015 deal, allowed any original participant to declare Iran in non-compliance, triggering a 30-day countdown at the UN. If the Security Council didn't act, all pre-2015 sanctions would automatically return. Ironically, the US, which left the deal in 2018, initiated this process, a move contested by nearly every other country. In 2025, with Iran escalating its nuclear activities, the US, UK, France, and Germany united to trigger snapback. Russia and China challenged the legality, arguing the US had forfeited its right but failed to block the process. The 30-day period expired. The old UN sanctions are now back in force. This includes bans on arms sales, missile development, and sanctions on key Iranian entities. The snapback, once a deterrent, is now reality, exposing deep divisions among world powers. The era of the JCPOA is over. The world faces a new, more dangerous status quo. President Trump's approach to Iran has shifted dramatically in recent months. After hinting at easing sanctions following a ceasefire with Iran, the administration quickly reversed course. Frustrated by Iran's refusal to negotiate and lack of cooperation with inspectors, the U.S. coordinated with European allies to trigger snapback. Trump, now at the UN, has fully embraced maximum pressure. Iran accuses the U.S. of betrayal, using the narrative to rally domestic support and justify defiance. The move has burned diplomatic bridges and hardened positions on both sides. Trump's foreign policy remains unpredictable. Hardline on Iran, yet flexible elsewhere, such as Ukraine. The upcoming meeting with Israel's Prime Minister will focus on coordinating strategy against Iran. This mix of assertiveness and unpredictability keeps allies and adversaries off balance. The world watches, uncertain of what comes next. The stakes have never been higher. The UN's decision has exposed deep global divisions. Russia and China fiercely opposed the snapback, calling it illegal and counterproductive, warning it could push Iran further from its commitments. Their failure to block sanctions was a diplomatic defeat, but their opposition remains strong. The US found renewed unity with the UK, France, and Germany, who declared the snapback necessary after Iran's nuclear escalation. Iran responded with fury, recalling ambassadors and accusing Europe of capitulating to US pressure. Other nations like India are caught in the middle, urging the US for waivers to import Iranian and Venezuelan oil, warning of global price spikes. The Middle East is sharply polarized. Israel welcomes the sanctions, while Iran's allies like Hezbollah condemn them. The new measures are expected to further squeeze Iran's regional network. The decision's economic and political ripples are global. Energy markets, alliances, and regional stability are all in flux. The world is recalibrating its approach to Iran. The consequences will be felt far beyond the UN's chambers. The crisis is now everyone's problem. For Iran's 88 million people, sanctions are not just politics, they're a daily struggle. The snapback has triggered fear and anxiety, especially in Tehran, where shortages and inflation are worsening. The healthcare system is on the brink. Sanctions make it nearly impossible to import medicines and equipment. Humanitarian trade is technically exempt, but banks and shippers avoid Iran, fearing penalties. Power outages, water shortages, and soaring food prices are becoming the norm. The Iranian rial is collapsing, and basic goods are out of reach for millions. Economic despair fuels unrest and hopelessness, especially among the young who once glimpsed opportunity after the 2015 deal. Officials project resilience, but the public mood is grim. For many, dreams of a normal life are fading. The human cost of sanctions is profound, often lost in headlines about nuclear programs. This is the reality behind the geopolitics. The return of UN sanctions on Iran jolts global energy markets. Iran's oil exports, already hit by U.S. sanctions, now face even tighter restrictions. With war in Ukraine and instability elsewhere, any further disruption risks a global price surge. Major consumers like India warn that cutting off Iranian oil could trigger a worldwide shock. Major consumers like India warn that cutting off Russian oil could trigger a worldwide shock. Major consumers like India warn that cutting off Venezuelan oil could trigger a worldwide shock. The U.S. must now balance its geopolitical goals with the economic needs of its partners. In the Middle East, an isolated Iran is more unpredictable, potentially accelerating its nuclear program or lashing out in the region. The fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran is at risk. Diplomatic channels are closing, raising the danger of miscalculation. Even a minor incident could spiral into major conflict. Europe's role as mediator is fading. The world enters a period of heightened risk, with fewer tools for de-escalation. The stakes are global, and the margin for error is shrinking. What happens next? Dr. Alistair Finch, a leading Iran expert, says the world is at a crossroads. The snapback has closed the JCPOA era. Now the choice is escalation or a new kind of diplomacy. One scenario, Iran retaliates by enriching uranium to weapons grade or expelling inspectors, risking military strikes and regional war. The other, extreme pressure, forces both sides to quietly explore new negotiations, perhaps through back channels. Internal politics in Washington and Tehran will decide the outcome. In Iran, hardliners argue the West can never be trusted. In the U.S., Trump balances toughness with a desire to avoid another war. The key question: will either side see more value in dialogue than confrontation? Crises can sometimes create unexpected openings for breakthrough. The next few weeks will set the tone for the future. The world waits for a signal: escalation or diplomacy. The stakes: nuclear proliferation, regional stability, and global security. The window for diplomacy is narrow, but not yet closed. We end tonight at a moment of profound uncertainty. The UN's snapback on Iran marks the end of a decade of diplomacy, and the return to confrontation. The consequences will ripple through oil prices, global security, and the strength of international institutions. The risk of a new Middle East war is real. What happens now depends on choices made in Washington, Tehran, and beyond. Will leaders find a path back to talks, or will escalation define our future? The world is watching, hoping diplomacy can be resurrected. The decision made today will shape our shared security for years to come.